Hey guys, it's Alicia Rain and welcome back to my channel Rainy Reads. Today's video I've just decided to title my 2023 wrap up because I have quite a few things that I want to talk about in this video. One, why I didn't post anything in December and like where I've been. Two, some of my reading stats. Three, my favorite books that I read this year and book series. And four, a book haul because it's been a minute since I did a book haul. And I don't have a whole lot of books, but I have quite a few that I want to share with you. So let's just get into this video. So where I've been and what I've been up to. I started a job in December, so that took up a lot of my time. And I was just struggling to find time to read, let alone film videos. I had 2 video ideas planned and they just completely fell through. Like the first one I could have put out even though I wasn't proud of it, and then I went to go edit and I realized that for the entire middle my microphone was dead and it didn't catch any of my audio. So I just completely scrapped that. And then I was going to try and push for 100 books. And my last video was going to be me reading my 100th book of the year. And I just could not bring myself to read 2 more books to hit 100. So that also got scrapped. So that's what happened and why nothing was posted. And I kind of went MIA. Well, not kind of. I basically was MIA for an entire month. But in exciting news, I did get a camera to make videos, and I'm very, very excited to learn, but I'm also very nervous because I've never filmed on a camera before. I got the Sony ZV-1, and I've also never edited stuff besides on my phone. So I'm going to have to learn how to film on a camera and then transport it into a computer and edit on a computer. So bear with me if my videos are going to be really spaced out. I mean, I'm not going to promise X amount of videos every month, especially with the job now and just trying to juggle my time with spending time with my family and my boyfriend, work, now reading and filming and editing. I just can't promise so many videos a month, and every month is going to be different. But I am excited to start filming on my camera. And yeah, it's just going to take me a while to get used to it, so bear with me if the editing is like really choppy and not that smooth. And another thing that happened in the month of December is that I made a Discord server. I mostly did that for you guys, my subscribers, because I just don't really know you guys that well like I do with my followers over on Bookstagram, so I thought it would be a fun way to get to know you guys more and so you can connect with other readers as well. A lot of my lovely friends from Bookstagram have joined, and I just think it'd be really fun. Mostly we're going to talk about books because we're book people, but there's other channels in there to talk about other hobbies and interests, and you can introduce yourself and meet new people. So yeah, if you want to join, I'll have it linked down below. And that's actually a good segue into the books that I bought this year, because the first book that I want to talk about is a book that we're actually going to read on my Discord. It's not required to join to read these monthly buddy reads. I just thought it could be fun if for some months you wanted to read along with me and do like a little book club thing. So basically I'm just picking a random book each month that's on my TBR, and I'm like, hey, if you want to read it with me, let's talk about it here. So the first book that we are going to be reading for the month of January is Curious Tides, and I'm going to completely butcher this author's name, but I think it's pronounced Pascal Lassalle. I really don't know a whole lot about this. I was browsing Barnes and this completely caught my eye, and all I know is that it's dark academia, it's fantasy, it takes place at a magic school, and the magic system is based on the lunar phases. So I think it'll be really fun and interesting. It is a bigger one. I know one person, my friend Willow, got the book, so I think it's just them and I right now reading this. I don't know if other people are going to or not, but if you want to read with us, come join and get your copy, and we can hopefully enjoy this book together, and hopefully it's good and not bad. But that's the first book of this haul that I wanted to share with you. Now the next few books that I got were from Book Outlet when they did their Black Friday sale, and just to try and speed this video up, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about these books. I'm just going to tell you mostly just like what the genre is, because some of these I really don't know what they're about. I've just heard good things. So the first 3 books that I ended up getting, which don't come for me, but I've never read any book by this author before, by Sarah J. Maas, but I got the first 3 books in the Throne of Glass series. So I'm really excited to read these. I really couldn't tell you much of what it's about. I know that it's a fantasy series, and I think there's romance in here as well. But yeah, I'm just really excited to read something by her. And from the little bits that I do hear about her books, I feel like this one, or this series, I would enjoy the most. So that's why I'm going to start with this one. And yeah, I still need to get the other books, but I'm really excited to read them. The next book I got is a YA romance, and that's 5 Feet Apart by 𝑦𝒂𝒕𝒄𝒉. I never watched the movie, but I've heard really good things. I also know that this book has made people cry, or at least the movie has. So yeah, I'm expecting to be emotional reading this. What made me really want to read this was that I've read a book by Rachel earlier this year, which was 𝑘𝒂𝒕𝒄𝒉, which was a sapphic romance that I really liked, and I think I read that in June. But yeah, so I'm excited to read another book by her, and like I said, I've heard good things, so at some point next year I will read this book. The next book is an LGBTQIA+ contemporary romance, and that is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. I think this is a second book in a series, but I think it's one of those series where you don't have to read it in order. If you read these books, let me know down in the comments. But yeah, this is the only one I saw available. But I'm excited to read this at some point as well. I do want to get the other books that are in this series, but this is just, like I said, the only one that I saw available. The next book is another contemporary romance, and that is The Two Lives of Lydia Bird by Josie Silver. I don't know a whole lot about this one, just that a lot of people loved it, and I feel like this one is going to talk more on grief because it's about her fiance, I think, passing, fiance or husband. And I think it's just her, like, going through memories that they've had together and trying to work through that grief. So I definitely expect to be crying a lot reading this, so I don't know when I'll read it. I don't know if it's one of those books where I should read it in one sitting if I have the time and, like, rip it off like a band-aid, or just take my time with it. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I am excited to read this, just I have no idea when I'll end up picking this up. I feel like it'll be one of those books where I have to be in the right headspace for it. And then the last book that I have to show you is actually a gift from Willow, who I mentioned earlier. I love them so much. They sent me a book for Christmas and left the sweetest note. They're one of the best people I've ever met on the internet, and they sent me a book off of my Amazon wishlist, which was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I know this is a duology. I have had this on my TBR for so long. When I first started watching BookTube years and years ago, this is one of those books that everyone was talking about. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it recently, so I don't fully remember what it's about, if I'm being completely honest. But it's fantasy, and that's all I need to know. But yeah, I'm really excited to read this, and if you're watching this, Willow, thank you so much. I love and appreciate you so much. You genuinely have no idea how happy this made me. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and our friendship. And yeah, that's me done gushing about Willow. So those were all of the books that I hauled or were gifted to me recently. So let's get into my reading stats. I wrote everything down because there's no way I'm going to remember it all at the top of my head. So if I'm looking down, that's what I'm doing. So the number of books that I read this year. Well, first I'll start off with what my goal was. So my goal was to read 70 books this year, which I did not think was doable, considering in 2022 I read 35 books in the whole year, and that was the most I had ever read ever in a year. So I thought I was really pushing it with 70. However, I didn't know I was going to be reading manga, so I was like, if I can get there, I'll get there. And then July came around, and I passed 70. Which was crazy. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll try and push for 100. And I really was so close, you guys, but I could not do it. I read 98 books this year. And even though I'm a little upset that I didn't actually get to 100, I, one, passed my goal, and two, managed to read 98 books. Which, can we just take a moment to think about how many books that is? When I was trying to pick out books to talk about for this video, I felt like I aged 3 years this year. Because I read so many books, and January of this year feels so far away. I don't know how to explain it. It was a weird time warp that I went through this year. But yeah, 98 books read, 33,725 pages, and my average star rating was 3.93 stars. But I did want to touch on that because if you've seen my reading vlogs, you know that I don't rate my individual volumes in manga series. I have a general rule on star ratings when I rate a book, but I also kind of do it by comparing if it's in a series, other books to the series, or other books that I had read recently. And if I'm reading a manga series, for example, like Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'm on volume 16, and I'm trying to remember why I gave volume 4 a 5-star rating, plus I read a bunch of other books that weren't in the series around that time, it's just too much for me to try and properly rank it in comparison to other things. So I just didn't rate any mangas. And I read 39 mangas this year, so 39 books had no rating. And I will say, I mostly, when I'm reading a manga, think that it falls around the 4-star category. So that would have spiked my rating up a lot if I actually rated those. But 3.93 for the rest of the books is still pretty good, I would say. And 7 books were 4.5-star reads, and 14 books were 5-star reads. So in terms of quantity and quality, this was a really good reading year for me. And then just a couple other random stats. My top 3 moods this year were adventurous, dark, and emotional. My top 3 genres were fantasy, manga, and young adult. And then 94% of the books that I read were fiction and 6% were nonfiction, which is not surprising at all. I love fantasy, I love fiction. I rarely read nonfiction, and I'm almost certain that all of the nonfiction that I read this year were just poetry books. So I wasn't even reading self-help books or memoirs. It was just poetry, which my goal was to read more nonfiction, but if it's just something that I don't gravitate towards or really enjoy, then I'm not gonna make myself do it. Which, speaking of not making myself do things, I don't think I'm gonna give myself a reading goal next year. Just for good reads and knowing that I'll read manga this year, I'll probably just set it at 50. But if I don't reach it, I just don't care anymore, because when I set a goal for something, I'm that type of person, I have to accomplish it. And I set really crazy expectations for myself. Like, when I started this channel, I wanted to upload every week, which I was able to do that for 2 months, I think, or 3 months. And then I just quickly realized that I could not do that. And with having YouTube and a Bookstagram account, I feel like it's very easy to fall under this pressure of having to read all of the time in order to put out content. So my goal is to just take my time and enjoy the books that I'm reading this year. I'm not going to say that I want to read X amount of this genre or that genre, just whatever I read, I read. I will say, I do want to work on the books on my physical TBR. So yeah, I guess the only real goal is to read books off of my physical TBR. But other than that, it's just kind of up in the air. Whatever happens, happens. So now that the statistics are out of the way, let's talk about some of my favorite series and some of my favorite books that I read this year. I have 4 series that I want to talk about today, and then I think 6 individual standalone books that I want to talk about. All of the standalones I'm going to talk about were either 4.5-star reads or 5-star reads, and then for the book series that I'm talking about, I have a series rating where I just added all of the stars up for all the books in there and divided by the number of books, and then that was what my rating was for the series. So let's talk about my series first. So basically how I'm going to do this is I'm going to tell you what the series or the book was, what the genre was, and then because I've read so many books this year, and also because I struggle a lot to try and hype a book up and explain what it's about, I'm just going to read the back of the book to you guys, and then I'll tell you some things that I liked about it, and then we'll just move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So the first series I want to talk about is actually a duology, and that is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I actually gave both of the books a 5-star rating, so the duology rating for this is 5 stars, and it is a YA fantasy. This is what the back of the book says. It says, Ketterdam, a bustling hub of international trade where anything can be had for the right price, and no one knows that better than criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker. Kaz is offered a chance at a deadly heist that could make him rich beyond his wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. A convict with a thirst for revenge, a sharpshooter who can't walk away from a wager, a runaway with a privileged past, a spy known as the Wraith, a heart-render using her magic to survive the slums, a thief with a gift for unlikely escapes, Kaz's crew are the only ones who might stand between the world and destruction if they don't kill each other first. I absolutely loved this duology, and I totally understand why it had so much hype, which is actually what put me off from reading this for the longest time, is because I didn't think it was going to live up to my expectations and all of the hype, but it did, and I'm so glad that I read this year. I actually read this way back in January, and it's still one of my favorite books that I read for the entire year, with reading 98 books, so I definitely think it deserves its recognition. This book has the found family trope, which is my favorite trope of all time. It has multiple POV, and it has a really diverse cast of characters. Like any fantasy, it takes a little bit to get into the story, but the world building was so well done. I loved how Leigh Bardugo wrote these characters and seeing their dynamics between each other and the relationships, and there were so many twists in this duology. It's just insane how many twists were in this duology, and I was always on the edge of my seat wanting more. I'm really upset that there's no more books for like this cast of characters, but I think I want to read, I think it's Shadow and Bone now, the trilogy that everyone said to read before this, but I didn't have it, and I owned these 2 books. So I will probably read that at some point, I just don't own them. But definitely recommend this series. The next series I want to talk about is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a YA LGBTQ+ romance graphic novel series, and it's just so adorable and wholesome, you guys. Shy and soft-hearted Charlie Spring sits next to rugby player Nick Nelson in class one morning. A warm and intimate friendship follows, and that soon develops into something more for Charlie, who doesn't think he has a chance. But Nick is struggling with feelings of his own, and as the two grow closer and take on the ups and downs of high school, they come to understand the surprising and delightful ways in which love works. This is just one of the best series that I've ever read, and I loved the Netflix adaptation for the series over there. I feel like they're bringing the characters to life so wonderfully, and yeah, it's just so wholesome. I absolutely love the characters in here. I love Nick and Charlie's relationship so much. They're probably one of my favorite book relationships ever. And before I forget, my series rating for this is 4.4 stars. Volume 5 just came out, which I still need to get, and I think there's only supposed to be 6 volumes. So I'm excited to read the rest of the volumes, but I'm also sad that it's going to end at some point because I always want to spend time with these characters. They're so great. I love how much LGBTQ plus representation is in here. I relate to a lot of the characters, and I just want to be a part of the friend group, of Charlie's friend group. They seem so fun and great, and even though there's moments that happen in here, it's just very wholesome and seems like such a great group of people to have as your friends. So I definitely recommend this if you haven't read it. Next is a well-loved fantasy series, and that's A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I started and finished this series, except there's 2 books. I thought there was 1 book that was supposed to come out after A Dance with Dragons, but apparently there's 2 that still have yet to be published, and A Dance with Dragons was actually the last book that I read this year. It was my 98th book, and it was published, I think, 11 years ago. So I don't know what George is doing, but I really need him to put those books out because I want to know what happens next. This series has a 4.4 star rating as well for me. In a land where summers can last decades and winters a lifetime, trouble is brewing. The cold is returning, and in the frozen wastes to the north of Winterfell, sinister and supernatural forces are massing beyond the kingdom's protective wall. At the center of the conflict lie the Starks of Winterfell, a family as harsh and unyielding as the land they were born to. Sweeping from a land of brutal cold to a distant summertime kingdom of Epicurean plenty, here is a tale of lords and ladies, soldiers and sorcerers, assassins and bastards, who come together in a time of grim omens. Amid plots and counterplots, tragedy and betrayal, victory and terror, the fate of the Starks, their allies, and their enemies hangs perilously in the balance as each endeavors to win that deadliest of conflicts, the Game of Thrones. This book is full of political intrigue, high stakes, betrayal, not really knowing who to trust, but also great world building, characters that feel so real, characters that you love and characters that you love to hate, and it's just so good. And I love the multiple POV in this, but it's also like one of the things that I don't like about it, just because we're following so many characters, and even though we spend time with all these characters, that time spent still doesn't feel like enough. Like, I just want more, which is probably crazy because these books are all really long, almost nearing 1,000 pages each, and I just want more. So yeah, I would really like George to publish those because I'd like to read them. But I know people have been waiting for a long time, so I'll also probably be waiting a long time before the rest of the books come out. And then the last series that I want to talk about has a 4.1 series rating for me, and that's the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. I absolutely loved this series. I read the trilogy for a video. I'll have it linked down below if you want to watch it. It does have a lot of spoilers in it, and it is pretty long, so keep that in mind before you click on it. But I just loved this so much. Each book follows something different, even though they tie in together. It's a YA mystery thriller, but I'll read you what the first book is about. This is the story of an investigation turned obsession. Pretty and popular high school senior Andy Bell was murdered by her boyfriend Sal Singh, who then killed himself. It was all anyone could talk about, and 5 years later, Pip sees how the tragedy still haunts her town. Now a senior herself, Pip decides to re-examine the closed case for her final project, at first just to cast doubt on the original investigation. But soon she discovers a trail of dark secrets that might actually prove Sal innocent, and the line between past and present begins to blur. Someone in Fairview doesn't want Pip digging around for answers, and now her own life might be in danger. There were so many twists and turns in here. I loved seeing everything connect and come together, and stuff from the first book getting brought back up in the third one, and just, it was so great. And I actually, in December, listened to the audiobook of Killjoy, which is like a novella that goes with this. It takes place before the main trilogy, but I would actually recommend listening to it after you finish the main trilogy. We're basically just following Pip, who the main character is, and we see what caused her to want to open this case. And the stakes are not high at all compared to like these three books, which I think is why I only gave that one a 3-star rating. But I still enjoyed it, and it was fun to be with the characters again. But I also love Pip, our main character. She's just so great, and she's just crazy. Like, she takes so many risks that she really shouldn't be taking, but she doesn't care. And I loved seeing her and Ravi's relationship as well. I really loved Ravi. Just, if you want a really good YA thriller series, definitely read this series. And I know that this one's really talked about a lot too, but it's talked about for a reason. So those were all of the series I wanted to talk about. So let's talk about all of the standalones that I really enjoyed this year. These aren't in any particular order because I just couldn't really rank them, so I'm just going to talk about 6 of some of my favorite reads this year. The first book I want to talk about is *Circe* by Madeline Miller. I gave this 4.5 stars. In the house of Helios, god of the sun and mightiest of the Titans, a daughter is born. But Circe is a strange child, not powerful like her father, nor viciously alluring like her mother. Turning to the world of mortals for companionship, she discovers that she does possess power, the power of witchcraft, which can transform rivals into monsters and menace the gods themselves. Threatened, Zeus banishes Circe to a deserted island, where she hones her occult craft and crosses paths with many of the most famous figures in all of mythology, including the Minotaur, Daedalus, and his doomed son, Icarus, the murderous Medea, and of course, wily Odysseus. But there is danger too, for a woman who stands alone, and Circe unwittingly draws the wrath of both men and gods, ultimately finding herself pitted against one of the most terrifying and vengeful of the Olympians. To protect what she holds dear, Circe must summon her strength and choose once and for all whether she belongs with the gods she is born from or the mortals she has come to love. This is a historical literary fantasy that follows the story of Circe from Greek mythology. If you've been introduced to that before or are somewhat familiar, I mostly know it just from school while learning about the Odyssey, and I just really love this. And I feel like even if you're not really knowledgeable on Greek mythology, Madeline Miller wrote this in a way that it was still easy to understand and grasp what was going on. Because I feel like when learning in school about mythology, it gets really confusing, and some of the text that you read, it's more like older, so it's just not as easy to understand. This still felt like a classic read, but modern, to where it was just easy to digest, and I definitely recommend it. I really liked Circe as a character, getting to know more about her. She was a character I was always intrigued to know more about when I was learning about the Odyssey, and I just really enjoyed this. The writing here was beautiful. There's really good quotes in here, and I just really like seeing Circe become more confident in herself and watching her go through what she went through and becoming so powerful. I really want to read the Song of Achilles now because that one I hear a lot more about than this book, and I loved this one. So I'm excited to read that at some point. The next book I want to talk about is a paranormal romance, and I gave it 4.5 stars, and that is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levin. Cassie Greenberg loves being an artist, but it's a tough way to make a living. On the brink of eviction, she's desperate when she finds a too-good-to-be-true apartment in a beautiful Chicago neighborhood. Cassie knows there has to be a catch. Only someone with a secret to hide would rent out a room for that price. Of course, her new roommate, Frederick J. Fitzwilliam, is far from normal. He sleeps all day, is out at night on business, and talks like he walked out of a Regency romance novel. He also leaves Cassie heart-melting notes around the apartment, cares about her art, and asks about her day. And he doesn't look half bad shirtless on the rare occasions they're both home and awake. But when Cassie finds bags of blood in the fridge that definitely weren't there earlier, Frederick has to come clean. Cassie's new roommate is a vampire, and he has a proposition for her. I really enjoyed this book. It's a rom-com. I don't usually laugh out loud when I read books, but this really had me laughing out loud. I loved Frederick in here. I loved him and Cassie's relationship. It was so sweet and cute. It was slow burn, but it really paid off in the end. And it does have some dual POV. It's mostly from Cassie's perspective, but we do get some parts in the book from Frederick's perspective. And yeah, it's just a great read, and I definitely recommend it, and I don't think you have to read it just during the spooky season. I feel like you could read it any time of year and enjoy it just as much. Next is a 5-star read for me that I've heard a lot of hype about, and I just wasn't sure if it was going to be the book for me, but it's a historical literary fiction book, and it's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Daisy is a girl coming of age in LA in the late 60s, sneaking into clubs on the Sunset Strip, sleeping with rock stars, and dreaming of singing at the Whistle a Go-Go. Her voice is getting noticed, and she has the kind of heedless beauty that makes people do crazy things. Also getting noticed is the Six, a band led by the brooding Billy Dunn. On the eve of their first tour, his girlfriend Camila finds out she is pregnant, and with the pressure of impending fatherhood and fame, Billy goes a little wild on the road. Daisy and Billy cross paths when a producer realizes that the key to supercharged success is to put the two together. What happens next will become the stuff of legend. The making of that legend is chronicled in this riveting novel written as if it were the oral history of one of the biggest bands of the 70s. In Daisy Jones and the Six, Taylor Jenkins Reid brilliantly captures an unforgettable place and time and an utterly distinctive voice. The fact that this isn't about a real band is insane to me, because I read this in one day and I listened to the audiobook as I read along, which I highly recommend, because even though this form of storytelling is very unique to me because I haven't read a book like it, and the format of the book was very different from anything I'd ever read, it could be very confusing to read just normally without the audiobook. And it really felt like I was listening to a documentary, and when I was done with this, I was just baffled that I could not look up and research this band. I was emotionally invested in these characters and this story, and I loved it so much that when the show came out and they put an album out on Spotify for the album that they were making in this book, it literally was one of my top artists of my Spotify Wrapped this year, was a fictional band. But I love it so much, and I definitely recommend it if you haven't read it yet. The next book is a fantasy book, and that was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records for company. But this quiet life is about to change. Linus is summoned by extremely upper management and given a curious and highly classified assignment. Travel to an orphanage on a distant island and determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous, in fact, that they're likely to bring about the end of days. When Linus arrives at the strangest of islands, he's greeted by a series of mysterious figures, the greatest mystery of which is Arthur Parnassus, the master of the orphanage. As Linus and Arthur grow closer, Linus discovers the master would do anything to keep the children safe, even if it means the world has to burn, or worse, his secret comes to light. The House in the Cerulean Sea is an enchanting love story masterfully told about the profound experience of discovering an unlikely family in an unexpected place and realizing that family is yours. You guys, I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. I thought at most I was going to give it 4 stars, and it was so close to a 5-star for me. It was so wholesome. I love the found family trope. Again, I know I already said it a bunch of times in this video, but it was done so well in this book, and I was like tearing up with happy tears. And it was just so perfect. I loved the children in here. I don't read a lot of books with children in it, but this was done so well. I love the fantasy elements in here as well, and just getting to know all of these characters. There's also just really good messages in here that people can take away from the story, and I really want to read another book by T.J. Klune now because it was just so good, and I definitely recommend it. If you want just a cozy read with found family and potentially cry about how lovely the people are in this found family, then this is the book for you. Next is a contemporary romance that I gave 4.5 stars, and that is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Poppy and Alex and Poppy. They have nothing in common. She's a wild child, he wears khakis. She has insatiable wanderlust, he prefers to stay home with a book. And somehow, ever since a fateful car share home from college many years ago, they are the very best of friends. For most of the year, they live far apart. She's in New York City, and he is in their small hometown. But every summer, for a decade, they have taken one glorious week of vacation together. Until 2 years ago, when they ruined everything. They haven't spoken since. Poppy has everything she should want, but she's stuck in a rut. When someone asks when she was last truly happy, she knows without a doubt that it was on that ill-fated final trip with Alex. And so she decides to convince her best friend to take one more vacation together, lay everything on the table, and make it all right. Miraculously, he agrees. Now she has a week to fix everything if only she can get around the one big truth that has always stood quietly in the middle of their seemingly perfect relationship. What could possibly go wrong? This is a friends to lovers rom-com with alternating timelines, and I love this book. The quotes in here were so good. I loved Alex and Poppy's relationship. I could relate to both characters. I feel like even though it's a romance, a lot of people could relate to what's going on in this book. It's about friendship too, really, before romance is involved. It's just a really good story about relationships, how people can drift apart. And also, our main character, Poppy, is just struggling to figure out what she really wants to do with her life, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to as well. So yeah, this was just a really, really good book. I don't know why this one is usually people's least favorite when they rank Emily Henry's books. I read Book Lovers, then I read this, then I read Beach Read, and then I read Happy Place, and this one is my favorite out of all of them. Even though it's a 4.5 star rating, this is one of my favorite books of all time, and I will cherish this book forever. Alright guys, the last book I want to talk about is a YA historical fantasy romance that I gave 5 stars, and I also did a video on this which has spoilers, and I will also link it down below if you want to watch it, and that was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. After centuries of sleep, the gods are warring again, but 18-year-old Iris Winnow just wants to hold her family together. Her mother is suffering from addiction, and her brother is missing from the front lines. Her best bet is to win the columnist promotion at the Oath-Gazette. To combat her worries, Iris writes letters to her brother and slips them beneath her wardrobe door, where they vanish, into the hands of Roman Kit, her cold and handsome rival at the paper. When he anonymously writes Iris back, the two of them forge a connection that will follow Iris all the way to the front lines of battle, for her brother, the fate of mankind, and love. Divine Rivals is an epic enemies-to-lovers fantasy novel filled with hope and heartbreak and the unparalleled power of love. I was really hoping I was going to love this book. I did not think I was going to love it as much as I did. There's dual POV in here, so we get perspective from both of our main characters. I loved them slowly falling for each other. The writing in here was beautiful. I was tearing up and crying in places in this book, and it just was so good. I loved the romance in here and the relationship, and I can't with the way that this book ended. I need Ruthless Vows as soon as possible. I knew I should have pre-ordered it because I was going to get it at Barnes and it was already sold out at my Barnes. So yeah, at some point I will be getting the book and I will probably read it in a day because I need to know what happens. That's everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know that it's been a while since I put videos out, but I'm just really excited for the new year, being able to film on my camera and planning new videos. I'm really excited, and even if I do take quite long breaks, just know that I'm missing making videos and I want to be doing it. I just don't have the time to do it as much as I want to. As always, I'll have my links down below. I'll have my Good Girls Guide to Murder series video and my Divine Rivals video linked down below, and I'll probably just link my playlist of all of my videos if you want to check more stuff out from me. I'll also have my social media linked down below. I'll have my Bookstagram, which is just an Instagram dedicated to books, so I'll have book reviews over there. I post on my story a lot. I do giveaways sometimes. I'll also have my personal Instagram if you want to follow me over there, and then my Discord I'll have linked as well that I mentioned earlier. And again, just a reminder, you don't have to read the monthly buddy read picks to join. but I just thought it'd be something fun to do. And then I also have my Amazon book wish list linked down below. I never expect anyone to send me anything, but if you want to send me something, please leave me a note. I'll keep it with the book that you sent me, and that way I can show it in a video, like during a reading vlog when I get it, or a dedicated book haul video, and that way I can remember who sent it to me. I hope you all are having a good day whenever you're watching this, and I wish you all a happy new year. I wish nothing but happiness and success and the best for everyone watching these videos, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!